So what we've been trying to do is develop a profoundly, deeply, heartfelt, compassionate understanding of how the kids who are struggling with complex trauma, which is all our kids, I hope by now that we've all just accepted that. That's the fact. And the complex trauma is extraordinarily hard to treat. We've accepted that. We've accepted, I hope, the fact that when we react, we meaning parents, schools, people on the streets, relatives, when we react to their reaction to complex trauma, that basically we destroy them. We cave in their world. Now I want to prove why that's the case. These pictures, the reason I chose these particular diagrams is because I think they bring home that truth in such an incredibly profound way. So the purpose of this second section is to understand and analyze these pictures together, and you'll understand it. So in the triune brain model, it's a model of the brain that highlights three parts. Obviously, there's many, many parts of the brain. From the secular perspective, they would never call it this piece, survival state. They call this piece here, this red piece, they call it the reptilian brain. And their Darwinian Kfira notions, the brain developed up, and then the other pieces came, it started up and then folded over. So the oldest part in their books is this part of the brain, which they call the reptilian brain. This area is where we call the limbic system, is where the emotional processes occur. And then here, this part of the brain is the executive states, or the prefrontal lobes, or the prefrontal cortex. You're going to see how relevant it is. These pictures, I hope, will be a game changer for everybody in understanding your kids. A game changer. I really mean it. It's something that visually you can see and get, and it alters everything. We're going essentially from this is the rational part of the brain, the blue part is the emotional, and the red part is the instinctual. That means the rational, the part where we think, the part everyone, I hope, is using now, means I hope no one's in the survival state right now. That would be bad news. Hopefully everyone's in the prefrontal cortex up here, listening and thinking. Some of you, I noticed, as I talk, go into the limbic, in the emotional state, and are finding some of the things I'm saying personally very difficult to hear. Because you connect with it and understand it, and you see your kids through a different light as I talk, and you go into the emotional state where you may want to cry. You feel emotional. It's very painful. That's a different state. But a person, in a very simplistic way, the brain's functioning goes from the rational, the green part, which is the prefrontal cortex, and then there's the emotional limbic system in the middle, the blue part, and the survival state, the brainstem. I just want everyone to have that picture clear. There are three different states of mind. Right? In the language of English, we call it, you're in this, what state of mind are you in? Well, this is exactly what it's talking about. Are you in a rational state of mind right now? Are you in an emotional state of mind right now? Or are you in a survival state? Are you just running away? And it's a huge, huge, huge nafkamina if you could know and recognize that with your child and quite honestly, with yourself. It makes a huge difference. I want to go back now to the picture before. Understanding the brain. With this in mind, what we just said, let's see if we can understand the brain. First of all, we're going to do the functions of the prefrontal cortex. You remember I showed you the green part, the executive states, that dark green area, that's the prefrontal cortex. And we're going to examine what are the functions of the prefrontal cortex, and you're going to see when the penny drops how profound this is. Because if you read off the list, take a look at the list. This is thinking about thinking, higher reasoning, executive functioning, thinking, daring, working it out. It includes, what are the 9 functions? Empathy, insight, response flexibility. That means if something's difficult, how to respond to it, to a stressful situation. Emotion regulation, not freaking out when something happens. Body regulation, morality, intuition, attuned communication. Couldn't be a better one than that. That's what we do up here. Attuned communication means, Rabbi say, it means like this: when your wife talks to you, you answer relevant to what she said. That's called attuned. They all know that. That's called attuned communication. They're all waiting for you to do that. That means you don't say, nah, and talk about something else. You actually, oh, you mean this. And you attune in, right? We also call it contiguous communication. Like Alaska and New Jersey, they're not connected, right? But New Jersey and New York are. They're contiguous. So when you communicate, it's meant to be connected, so you respond to what they say. Is this okay, ladies? Am I doing good? Okay, great. Yes. Okay. See, you notice, they do it naturally. We don't. Anyway, attuned communication. The good news is we have it too. It's somewhere deep inside our prefrontal cortex, the ability to do it. And fear modulation. Now, just imagine, those are all the koiches. They're all the 9 of the major qualities that are achieved through using the prefrontal cortex. Essentially, those are the skills for life. Healthy people use those skills and modulate between those skills, up and down, whichever one you need, going easily between those states in order to deal with life. So a non-traumatized person, when confronted with a challenging situation, someone who's not traumatized, utilizes the 9 functions of the prefrontal cortex, stays there because they're not a traumatized person, so they deal with the situation using these very mature, and healthy aspects of how a person functions. That's all in the prefrontal cortex. It's right there. The limbic part, which I showed you before, the emotional state is the limbic state. So what happens when you're fighting with someone, debating, arguing, you've got a stressful moment, right? This actually, forgive me, really forgive me, I don't want to stereotype, so forgive me. My wife will get me over the head for this if I get it wrong, so I'm going to say it right. Okay? But it's probably more likely that when that attuned communication from him to her didn't occur 2 or 3 times, she might well drift into the limbic system, the emotional state, and start crying or be upset and angry. Am I right or wrong? Is it more or less right? Yes, there was some clapping. Okay, we got it. Shoo. Did I do it right? It wasn't stereotyping? Okay. Not that we can't. Men do that too. We get into emotional state, we just get angry. Our emotion is more likely to be anger. So someone doesn't listen to you, doesn't tune into you, you don't know what to do, and you rush through the 9 functions of the prefrontal cortex, trying to deal with the crisis in front of you, the situation that's so painful and difficult to deal with. You go up and down, and generally speaking, men are more likely, if it doesn't work, to head straight to the limbic system, shut off the prefrontal cortex, and get angry, get mad, raise your voice, make an angry face. Do you understand? It's the emotional state. I'm guessing that Noshim are more likely to go into the emotional state with crying and upsetness and frustration. Probably. I'm just guessing that's more likely. Personally, I don't know. We stay in the prefrontal cortex all the time. So this is sort of healthy people. This is how the brain functions and how healthy people do. So you dip into the limbic. I'm dealing right now only with crisis. There are many good reasons to dip into the limbic system that have nothing to do with crisis. You go to a chasna, you don't go rationally into a chasna. Hopefully you go warm and loving and emotional into a chasna. I'm not addressing that at all now. I'm simply addressing that when you're dealing with a crisis, a threat, a difficulty, a problem, someone's attacking your integrity, making you feel stupid, threatening you in some way, strong or small, but they're threatening you. So a healthy person, did it again, I'm going to get used to this. A healthy person, when threatened, their integrity, their dignity, they're covered, your ego. So you go through the 9 functions of the prefrontal cortex. That's what intelligent, healthy, gesunde people do. And you solve the problem. You have attuned communication. Your response flexibility, emotion regulation, insight, empathy. You use these kaiches to work through the conflict that you're experiencing, and you solve the conflict. That's a healthy, non-traumatized person. Does that make sense? Am I clear about that, right? Then, if that doesn't work so well, even healthy people are likely to step into the emotional state, the limbic system, the blue part, and there, in the blue part, is where all the problems start. Because in the blue part, you can see is fight, flight, freeze, stress response, thinks, am I safe? Do people want me? Emotions live here. When you're threatened, you go into the limbic state, the limbic part of the brain, and you shut down being rational. Because I tried being rational. I tried reasoning with you. I tried exploring other options and being flexible, and processing and having insight. I tried to process with you maturely, and you keep on attacking me. So at that point, a person goes into fight, flight, and freeze, which is in the limbic system. You start going there to escape. The limbic brain is the place where I go to know if I'm safe. Am I safe? I just want to get away from you. So fight, flight, I'll start screaming at you. I'll start yelling at you, intimidating you, because I want to shut you up, because I don't like what you're saying. I want you to stop it. So I'm going to scream at you or yell at you, or sometimes cry hysterically. It's an attempt to be safe. In other words, I just want to stop you. You're hurting me. So I go into this state because I want to be safe. In that place is the question, do people want me? Do you want me? Because it doesn't feel like it. If you wanted me, we'd have attuned communication. We would have been talking and schmoozing, showing insight and flexibility and understanding of each other, whoever we were. By the way, husbands and wives, we flow backwards and forwards in this. If you can chap this, your shalom bayis can take off. I'm telling you, it can take off. If you can chap what's happening to you. Because what happens is people use up the 9 functions of the prefrontal cortex, and you decide you've done enough of that. Done enough of that. You're not listening to me. Are you listening to me? Right? And you go straight into, you're not listening to me. Yes, I am. You're not hearing me. Right? And then it's like you're both in the limbic system. But it's another attempt not to change you at this point. I'm trying to stop you. It's not a discussion of a mature conversation anymore about working out the problem. I just want you to stop because you're hurting me. Does that make sense? In such a state, I'm still staying with healthy people. I didn't do the trauma piece yet. With healthy people, we go backwards and forwards, and then when we feel a bit safer, we come back into the prefrontal cortex, and we start dealing rationally. Maybe you go to sleep, go for a walk, take a time out, pull yourself together, come and apologize, and you process again, you go back into the prefrontal cortex. This is how healthy people process. We got it? Okay. I'm going to do, should I do it yet? 1 minute. Should I do it yet? Okay, yeah, why not? Let me do it. So where does the survival state fit in here? You see, in trauma, traumatized people go almost instantly. Remember what we said about in definition of PTSD? We said earlier that they will have a severe psychological reaction at exposure to internal or external cues that symbolize or resemble an aspect of the original trauma, right? So they're very quick there. Regular, non-traumatized people, we can stand our ground and have a conversation. And we tolerate, the dissonance between us. We tolerate it and we modulate. That means when you realize, that you've pushed your wife a little too far and she's getting hurt, you pull back and say, I'm so sorry. Because, oh, you're not my chavrus, I forgot. Right, okay, let me try again. You have to talk more sensitively and you modulate. You see her emotional reaction and you modulate and pull back in a healthy relationship. Same thing, in the other direction. A man starts getting angry and you realize that's the wrong way to be and you slow down and catch your breath and again we process. We go in and out of those two states. A severe psychological reaction is when they go straight to the survival state. They go straight to they skip the whole thing. They sense real danger is lurking here. Real danger. Remember, this is the danger we discussed before of thousands of events that demoralized and destroyed them. Thousands of little mini episodes that made them feel hopeless and useless. There's a term that was used and is used, unfortunately and tragically, in school systems about kids getting thrown out of school. We've all heard that terminology. As far as I'm concerned, garbage gets thrown out. Kids don't get thrown out, but they do. And we even use that language, and kids know that language. I was thrown out. You see, that's abusive. When you even know that I could be thrown out, and I might be thrown out, and you're on probation, and you might be thrown out, it means you're not wanted. We said before, in the limbic state, do people want me? I'm trying to work it out. I feel threatened and offended. Do people want me? And then I say, yes, I think my wife does want me to have a conversation with her. So I get myself together and I go back into the prefrontal cortex and I have a conversation with her. So I realize she does want me. What do you think a child who's had literally thousands of micro experiences of being thrown out, not wanted, discarded, told you're inferior, incompetent, incapable, there's something wrong with you, they skip the whole system and they go straight to the survival state. In the survival state, they've effectively shut down the other two states. They're effectively, and we're going to talk a lot about this, I hope, they're offline. They're offline. They're not there. They're not there. There's no one home. So any conversation, fight, argument, debate, attempt to get them back will inevitably and absolutely fail. Because they're not here. They're not home. They've run away. They've disappeared. And at that point, what's taken over is the nervous system. They're actually taken over by their own nervous system. It's not rational anymore. You're not having a conversation, a rational conversation. They've already gone into what is essentially a reaction of the nervous system to keep them safe. It places them offline. They go offline. There's no one home. So let's talk a bit about the autonomic nervous system. So it's like this. Again, those who've done Reggie's course, I'm positive you will have studied this a lot, because you can't do somatic work without it. Am I correct? Good. But this is just important to understand the language. Let's not get too worried about all the scientific language. It's the concept that's important. So inside us all, there are two nerves. There's the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. And they have two opposite jobs. So the sympathetic nervous system prepares the body for intense physical activity and is often referred to as the fight or flight response. In other words, it activates. Forget the word sympathetic has nothing to do with sympathy. It's to do with the relationship between the two nerves. It's not the emotion of sympathy. So the sympathetic is moving. Here it is. This is the sympathetic on top. And this always takes us towards fight and flight. We get aroused. We get argumentative. We get scared. We get threatened. We start fighting. So the sympathetic nervous system takes over to prepare you for fight and flight, to get ready for a fight. You start getting, the word we use is activated. You start getting activated. A person gets red in the face. Their voice gets louder. They breathe faster. They're getting ready for a fight. And you can see it, you can feel it. When you're engaging someone, you can feel it happening. The parasympathetic nervous system has almost the exact opposite effect. Its purpose is to relax the body. So here's life. Just to understand, we're doing healthy first of all. Just want you to understand healthy. And if we don't get here, I have to tell you this. If we're allowing our kids to activate us out of this, then they will never recover, and we will become part of their problem. Us as parents have to understand what's happening to us physiologically inside, to our nervous system. You feel it. Come on, everyone feels it. When they have that severe, psychotic look at you, what do you feel like? How do you feel? You want to kill someone. You want to run away. You're activated. You want to give them a piece of your mind. You want to yell. You want to do something. But you feel like you need to act. You don't just stand there. You get activated. A healthy nervous system is this. It's this gentle up and down of life where we go through normal, constant challenges. Nisyonis, chaim. Little things and big things. Finding a parking space. Right? When you're late for a meeting or late for an appointment and you can't find a parking space. Right? Some people get activated and become weird and childish. Some people. I claim it. Some people, like my wife, they just talk to Hashem and He opens up a parking space for them. So if you ever need a parking space, speak to her. She'll get you one. I've been with her. It's true. It's incredible. And some people get like tense, be late, the old Yekish blood from England, and you're going to be late for the appointment, and you start getting activated. Do you understand? We all live life like this, and it can be getting your kids off to school in the morning, and you suddenly can't find one shoe, and the bus is coming, right? Who doesn't get activated at that moment, right? And then you find the shoe and you settle and you remember and you breathe. You remember what your therapist taught you in the last session, and you start breathing. We'll give you a different shoe. You can wear 2 different shoes. That's okay if we have to. And you work through all the, things they taught you and you get back. But the goal of a healthy person, you see, is to stay between those two lines where life always throws at us issues, correct? Daily, non-stop. Nisyonis achayim, they never end. And Kadosh Baruch Hu created us in a way where the body can, rise to the occasion, right? That's what the sympathetic system does, the nervous system. It gets you activated enough to deal with, more alacrity, get into it, deal with it, quickly get that, that skirt that your daughter needed for school that was crumpled in the bottom of the closet and she has to leave in the bus in 2 minutes, and you can iron a pleated skirt in 2 minutes. Wow, good for you. And that's what the sympathetic nervous system did for you. It activated you to get you doing it. You don't want to stay like that all day because you'll be like, the Energizer Bunny. You can't. You'll burn up too much energy. No one can handle it. So then the parasympathetic kicks in and slows you down. We got the picture? This is normal person. This is ideal. We, by the way, I submit to you, if there's nothing else you gain this entire weekend, but realizing that our obligation and responsibility and commitment to our children, especially our struggling children, is to get there. If there's nothing else you take home, and you will, because it's an extraordinary program. It's mind-blowing, this program. But if there's nothing else you take home but realizing my job is to be between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, meaning to say, I've got to settle myself. I've got to stay within parameters, healthy parameters for my child. If I can't get there, then we're going to start bouncing off each other. I'll activate them, they'll activate me. My activation will activate them, and we'll both end up in the survival state, disconnected, frustrated, and angry. Does that make sense?
Very much.
Sorry?
Very much.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so look, this is another way of looking at it. Yes? I hope, and let me answer the question. The question is, are we going to learn how to get there? So my hope is, obviously, to learn truly how to get there and stay there under all circumstances. Go to your local therapist, they'll teach it to you. It's not that difficult. You can do it. There are grounding techniques, you could do it. My hope, at least here, because there's a lot I want to cover, is the understanding and knowledge of what I'm looking for and where I need to be schleps me towards it. Just knowing where I'm going and what it is just having a visualization, a picture of what I'm meant to be doing actually schleps. I do this with all my clients. I never do any techniques ever till we've done this. Till they've owned this, and what I discover is when they've owned this, when the clients really get this, they pretty much do it themselves. Because you're aware of it. You understand, you realize what's going on instead of just being angry randomly. You realize, I got activated. That word activated, by the way, is a take-home word. That's the Lashon of Kesher Nafshi 2020. Activated. Am I activated? Because if I am, that means I'm outside. Basically what's happened is when I got activated, see activation, I've gone outside my window of tolerance. This window, this is life. This is the river of life. There's activation, settling, activation, settling, activation. This is how we live. And although the bandwidth could be very narrow, our goal is to expand the bandwidth, our whole life, to expand it so I live sort of a healthy kind of life where I'm not acting weird and angry and frustrated. I'm not overreacting, but I'm settling myself. I'm aware of become activated. And the awareness of becoming activated, if I could just own it humbly, actually the awareness, chemically and brain-wise, starts the process of the parasympathetic taking you back down. Becoming aware that I just got activated helps the chemical releases in the body that brings you back down. Because I tell you what you feel prior to that awareness that you're activated. You feel justified. Justified. That's what you feel. You feel horribly justified in your reaction. It seems to be the right reaction. And you feel there's a justification for it. And therefore you continue on your rampage, unaware of who you may be hurting. When you realize, I just got activated, and that's what my body does. It keeps me on this path of life where unavoidably there are always nisyonis. My goal is to deal with them, the ups and downs in life, but within a window of tolerance where others, think of it this way, where others around me can tolerate me. Think of the window of tolerance as that, where the people around me can tolerate me, so that my excitement and passion, my wife often says it to me, right? Isn't it true? I get too passionate about stuff. My wife, calms me down, and I, because my passion can get too, right? Am I right? Right? It's true. I'm just being honest. And that's the activation. I get too activated and she'll bring me down again. Just the awareness I'm getting too activated will bring me down. So, what are the signs you see of a healthy person? And we'll contrast this in a minute to what happens, unfortunately, with complex trauma sufferers, which is our kids, who are all dealing with this complex trauma. You see, when we're in the window of tolerance, that means when we've got this nice flow to our lives where we rise to the occasion, we get more passionate when necessary and we calm down when necessary, but we stay in that flow of life. So somatically, regulation, repair and cleanup, ease, grounded, settled, pain symptoms lower. By the way, the pain goes down. You feel less pain in life. You just feel more at ease about life. That's the physical somatic symptoms. Mental, emotional signs are you're more calm, curious, playful, relaxed, relational. And behavioral signs, you have cooperation, completion of tasks, spontaneity, empathy, creativity. Now take all those things and imagine what happens to all of those things when you exit the window of tolerance. That means, do I have a picture of it? Well, I do, hyperarousal. Here we go. So you have like this. This is that window, this is the window of tolerance in here. This is optimal arousal. Cool, calm, collected, and connected. Right, does that make sense? You're just with the program and you're tuned in with other people. When you're too hyper-aroused, too much arousal, you can't integrate, sympathetic nervous system goes off the charts, and you got the fight and flight response. You're up here. When you're up here, you're not connected, collected, cool, or calm. Similarly, when you have hypoarousal, that means you've gone too far down, which also happens in fight or flight, immobilization. You shut down. Flat affect, no energy, inability. Think about your kids. Think about your kids, you're struggling, think of one of your struggling, suffering kids. When they get activated, something goes wrong in their life. There's one of two responses they're going to do. They're either going to, in the lotion of the streets, freak out, right? They're going to go crazy. That means, in our language, a severe psychological reaction at exposure to. They've experienced something that reminds them of their original trauma, and they freak out. So they go up here. Emotional overwhelm, feeling unsafe, impulsivity, anger, rage, defensiveness, racing thoughts, emotional reactivity, hypervigilance, etc., tension, shaking under poor judgment. What kid doesn't have poor judgment? We're in that state. And then we wonder about why they have such poor judgment. Well, that's because they're in that state. When they've gone into this activated, hyper-aroused state, they're going to have poor judgment. Can you imagine at that moment? This is that thing I was trying to explain earlier today. Imagine how honestly cruel, I don't have another word for it, is when a kid goes into hyperarousal. And why do they get there? Because they have complex trauma. And in complex trauma, remember, you're going to have a severe psychological reaction at exposure to internal or external cues that symbolize or resemble an aspect of the original trauma, right? We got the lambdas, we're following it? So that happens, triggers them. They go into the fight and flight, into the red zone of the brain because they just want to survive. They're hyper-activated. And guess what? When you're hyper-activated, you have poor judgment. Because guess what's offline? Right? The frontal cortex is offline. It's offline. So of course you've got poor judgment. And then we nail them on their poor judgment. They do something stupid at that moment, and then we criticize them for that behavior. Number one, it's just foolish. Let's just be frank. It's foolish because if someone's offline, criticism should be constructive. Just a vent is useless. There's no heta, just a vent on someone. If you criticize at all, it's to be constructive, to help a person. If the person's offline and hyperactivated right now, guess what criticism will do to them? Activate them more. If they have poor judgment already, criticizing them for their poor judgment makes them have worse judgment. Whose fault is that? Ours. It's pasha heartbreaking. So the kid does something stupid and then gets criticized for the stupid thing they did. But the stupid thing they did was part of their fight and flight because they have complex trauma and they wanted to free themselves. I could ask the Rosh Yeshiva, is that not honest? Are we talking honest or not? We're talking honest. It's pashut, in that state where the brain is offline and the limbic system's offline, a person's hyperactivated, so whatever they're doing is honest. Reasonable? Am I okay? Safe ground? Shkoyach. So, imagine how cruel it is when we start expecting them to have good judgment when they're already activated. And then we activate them and make them worse. Now, what's the reason we do that? Because I'm activated. Because I got activated. Because I saw it and it got to me, and my self-esteem, my shame. Shame is such a toxic thing, and I let my shame bite me again. I felt embarrassed, it must be my chinuch cause, in the back of our brain, all this rubbish that tells us why it must be my chinuch, and it must be this, or must be that, I didn't do enough homework with them, whatever we were. It's all crazy stuff, but that activates us, and then we activate them. See, a kid who's activated, guess what they need? A non-activated parent. They need us to ground quickly. They need us to stay calm. They need us to absorb and listen and just embrace and accept at that moment. Because guess what that does? That creates the parasympathetic in them to reground themselves, and they come back down, they come back in. The same system is true the other way around. When they're too shut down, when they've been too hurt and triggered, when the severe psychological reaction was triggered too many times, and they're shut down, and they perhaps didn't have a parent standing there right in front of them, willing to ground themselves and accept them as they are, embrace and accept with body language, facial expression, tone of voice, saying, I accept you, Basher Husham. When they didn't have that, many of them go into hypoarousal, which is little or nothing, they disappear. They shut down and they disappear. People tell me, my kid hasn't come out their room in 3 days. They've been locked up for days on end. They don't come out to us. They never see us. They come out nocturnal to get food. Look what they're like. Think about your kid. Flat affect, no energy. Inability to think clearly. Numbing, collapse. Feeling disconnected, no feelings. Can't defend oneself. Or say no. Dissociation, shut down, passive, ashamed, withdrawing, isolating oneself, hopelessness. There's the list. I'm guessing every one of us has seen that with some of our kids many, many times. And each time we get upset about it. Why are they in the room? They get them out of the room, It's like we look at it as if they've done something bad. And what we didn't realize is what's happened is they went into hypoarousal. All they need from us is not a drasha. Look what it says here. Feeling disconnected, no feelings, hopelessness, right? Inability to think clearly. What is the benefit then of going in to have a talk? They tell the husband, the wife tells the husband, go in and have a talk with him. Right? Oh, you've all said that one, right? Okay. Go talk to him. Do something. Right? That talk to him, what is that talk to him exactly? Talk what? What? Inability to think clearly. When you're shut down, the parasympathetic has taken you, shut you down. Inability to think clearly. What exactly is that conversation going to look like? It's mad. That conversation might get him out of the sympathetic because he might, or the parasympathetic, because he might leap immediately into the sympathetic and scream at you. It might activate him and put him right, but it won't put him in the middle. You know what will put him in the middle? You will put him in the middle by being in the middle. If we can get ourselves into the middle place, if we could get ourselves grounded, if we could stop activating ourselves and stop shutting down and running away, but embrace and understand and accept and be present in your child's life. Just be, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to be a psychologist. You don't have to be an amazing mashpia who's just got all the right things to say. That's the last thing he needs. What he actually needs from you right now is just to be a safe place, calm, collected, not going crazy. You remember we used to do it? Remember? We used to do it. We'd have this thing where the kids would come in and they would, the ones who were struggling, and they would scream at us and curse us and scream at us, and they were in the totally hyper-arousal zone. And we were saying, oh, it's so interesting. Oh, wow. Oh, okay. Oh, really? Okay, tell me more. Okay, good. Okay. That's not things like that, am I right? And then we'd resist, high-fiving, when they walked out the room, because we didn't reactivate them, because they'd slam out the room, but they calmed down. And 10 minutes later, I go to their room, you okay? And they say, sure. Need a hug? Yeah. They need us to ground ourselves. Laws up. Do you understand? In this hyper-arousal zone, inability to think clearly, correct? Over here, poor judgment. So it's not rocket science to realize that discussing and debating and explaining to your kids what's wrong with their behavior when they're in these two zones, hyper or hypo, when here's poor judgment and over here they have no ability to think clearly. Why discuss it with them? So there's nothing to talk about, there's what to be. At that moment, you're meant to just be with them. Otherwise, you will activate them because they have complex trauma. And you will become part of the triggers of their trauma, and then they'll have another severe psychological reaction. So let's understand now, we talked, I think 2 years ago, about the role of the amygdala. So we said like this, right? The prefrontal cortex, executive functioning. This is where it all goes on, right? In here is the hippocampus, memory, that's the limbic system. But in there is this little thing called, this sneaky thing called the amygdala. Now the amygdala, you have to understand, the purpose of the amygdala is to protect us, is to save us, is to keep us safe somehow. The job of the amygdala is to recognize, is something dangerous coming my way? Now just put yourself, if you can, just for a moment, into the shoes of a child who suffered complex trauma. We gave 2 examples just for the sake of our conversation here. One was the example of a young child who was sexually abused. And because they unfortunately were sexually abused, now their experience going through life and going through the system will be to re-traumatized frequently, a myriad of times, every day actually. A girl who was sexually abused and now finds herself to be in the framework of being in that world, every time her mother talks to her about SNEAS will be activated. She'll be activated. A boy, again, I'm just drawing 2 simple examples because they're so common and so tragic. A boy who has an undiagnosed, clearly learning disability, but some sort of undiagnosed learning disability, and there's 100 reasons why he might have it. 100 reasons. But it was undiagnosed, he doesn't have the proper help, and he feels like a loser, failure, a disgusting, worthless creep, a person who doesn't belong in this world, because what does he hear every day? And I'm not judging, you understand, I'm just describing. But every day, what is he hearing in class and in school and in life and his rebbeim? He's hearing chizuk, to be a gadol b'Yisrael, to learn stark, to grow, to nutzos, to kaiches, to learn more, to chazer. He's hearing, because what else are they teaching in schools and yeshivas, if not trying to inspire the children to learn more and steig more? That's what they do. That's what the system is doing. Again, I want to be very clear. I'm not judging. I don't want to get into that sugya. I'm describing what is the experience, though, of a undiagnosed learning disordered kid. And there are thousands of them, obviously. Thousands and thousands. By the way, you are effectively learning disabled in today's world if you simply don't have a high enough kishron. If you're not smart enough, because most of teaching goes to the top of the class. The excitement in a class is to the top part of the class. The middle part of the class is full of kids who would like to be there, good kids, lovely people, who would like to be there, and they have to work incredibly hard to be there, where they're disabled because they're not able to do the level of the class. It's not a learning disability, you understand? But they are disabled because they're not able to get hundreds and 90s and hundreds. It's not in their parsha. They can't do it. What is life? Let's take a kid like that tens of thousands of times from when he first entered primary till, if he makes it through the system, till he makes it through. How many times has he felt in his heart that he's a failure and a loser? He's never going to make it. He's not good enough. How many thousands of times, right? When you add all that up, that's complex trauma. So again, like we gave the marshal, when you go to get him to learn and you want to inspire him, he can have that severe psychological reaction. That's why there are loads of kids. It's so painful and tragic. And these are kids who are still in the system, by the way. I've heard this from countless children, where young men, where they go to Eretz Yisrael, to Beis Midrash, they come home, and there's two things don't exist. Number one is sof zman kriya shema. There's no such thing as ben hazmanim. It's like optional. Sof zman kriya shema is optional. And learning is, I'm on vacation now. It's ben hazmanim. How? Why? That's trauma. That's not rational. That's a kid who experiences trauma when he learns, tries very hard and feels like a loser, is actually, it's traumatic for him, and he pushes himself to do it. So what's the purpose? What's the purpose of the amygdala? So the purpose of the amygdala is this little piece of the brain whose job is to detect anything happening that could threaten my integrity. Anything, everything. It's like a radio wave thing, a sensor that senses and picks up nuances in life all the time, non-stop, to see whether or not I'm being threatened. Well, if you expand that world of threatening, if you expand that with kids with complex trauma, what is their experience daily of feeling threatened? Complex trauma children. We all know we have them. Do you think they ever get through a day without being activated? Kimat never. That means their amygdala almost every day will see something that is scary and frightening about life, and will shove them very quickly back into the survival state. Will take them offline very, very quickly. And the amygdala sees fear based on previous abusive experience, things that happened to them. Whatever's happened in their life, the amygdala will pick it up and it will shut them off. Now, what's the purpose of the amygdala? First of all, obviously its purpose is to protect us, right? You don't want to get hurt. If you have actually been, for example, God forbid, a person's been mugged, then there are sounds, sights, smells, feelings, associations to that mugging event, which the brain remembers, and when the brain experiences anything like that, you will be activated immediately. The sympathetic nerve system goes into activation to save you. It's a benefit to us. But what happens if, like in learning, take learning or divrei Torah, and the kid's just not quick enough or sharp enough, and has been made to feel stupid his whole life, which is what happens to so many of these poor children. So that even the Shabbos table, the parsha, if you see their faces when they're little and you want to do a parsha sheet at the table, and you start asking questions and you see what happens to them, and the kid runs from the table and you don't know why, and you think they're rebellious. Chas v'shalom. They're activated and they're doing just what they're meant to do. They're protecting themselves. They're getting out of there before they get asked a question that they might not know how to answer. Do you know how humiliating and shaming it is for any of these kids who are like these complex trauma kids, and the father sits at the table and says, "What's the parsha this week?" He's being innocent. He's just like talking the parsha. And there's one kid, this kid, who has complex trauma. He doesn't know. He was checked out the whole week. He was checked out. So yeah, he's going to run from the table. So the purpose of the amygdala is primarily to protect us. The bear in the woods. What's the purpose? What happens? Right? If you're on a Chol Hamoed trip somewhere, and you're with your family having a picnic, which, by the way, I recommend strongly, instead of going to Great Adventure and all this rubbish. I really, really, really recommend family time alone with a ball in the park. It's just amazing. Going to these fun fairs and things is such a waste of time and money, and it doesn't create connection. And going to a park somewhere with a ball and having fun does. It creates connection. It's amazing. But here you are in this park, following my advice, having a Chol Hamoed trip, and out of the undergrowth, from some distance away, walks a bear, a medium-sized brown bear. What happens? What happens? Well, the amygdala notices. If nothing else does, I guarantee you, the amygdala notices. Here's what you don't want to do. What you don't want to do is say, "Oh, look, what a cute bear. Quick, get the camera. Let's take pictures. Can we do a selfie with it? Can I No, you don't want to do that kind of stuff. You don't want to go anywhere near it. You don't want to sit there glaring. One minute. Which is the dangerous one, the brown one or the black one? No, 1 second. Yankee, what do you remember? Is it the brown? Which one's is this? You don't want to do any of that. What you want to do is back off quickly, leave everything, and get in the car. So the amygdala does something very beautiful. It shuts down the prefrontal cortex, the rational part, so you won't have these lomdisha conversations about which type of bear, and can you run faster than the bear? I don't know is that a cub or is that the... You don't want to talk about it. You want to shut that part of the brain down. You want to shut the part of the brain that thinks it's so cute, let's go take a picture. And you want to get out of there. Interestingly enough, this is all internally what's happening. This is why, by the way, I just want to make this comment, people who have constant reactions to life as if there is a bear coming out of the undergrowth somewhere attacking them, often end up with gastrointestinal problems. Why is that? And the answer is because when you have the amygdala senses danger, it shuts off all unnecessary major organs in your body, which digestion is the first one that gets shut off. That's why gastrointestinal and Crohn's and irritable bowel syndrome, all these kind of things, seem to be related to people who have complex trauma. Because people with complex trauma, unfortunately, are constantly being triggered. Their amygdala is constantly being aware of different things happening that could threaten me, and so the system shuts down. And no, in the bear example, I think the way they say it, the scientists, is I'd rather not digest than be digested. That's the way they remember it. In other words, I don't want to be digested, right? So they HaKadosh Baruch Hu made this amazing system. It shuts down digestion. It shuts down a lot of systems instantly in the body, keeping online only the ones for fight and flight. Well, imagine, again, please put yourself in the shoes of your child who suffers with complex trauma, who is constantly, their amygdala, seeing, feeling, experiencing, sensing something that could be dangerous, that could threaten my integrity, that could make me feel worthless, hopeless, and horrible about myself. And of course they shut down. They shut down to escape from it. The amygdala converts the reaction of a previous threat to a future threat. Something happened in the past, a previous threat. The amygdala takes the sensory, the experience, the emotions, the feelings that occurred around that old threat and makes you re-experience them right now to get out of there. That's the severe psychological reaction. Again, debating a child like that, what a waste of time. Because they're activated or they're shut down. They're not there. There's no one to talk to. Here's the most important one that you have to remember. The amygdala has the power to shut down, or let's at least say impair the functioning of the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system. We explained that the prefrontal cortex has those 9 features of how rational, healthy people deal with life. The amygdala shuts that off. Because at this moment, no, we're not going to discuss the pros and cons of brown or black bears. No. We're going to just get out of there. So it shuts off that. The amygdala doesn't want you taking selfies with a bear or with any other threat. You understand? So it shuts off the limbic system. And all you're left with is the survival, the red part, the brainstem is all you're left with. You're completely shut down. That's what the amygdala does. It puts you offline. So just imagine at that moment having any form of debate or discussion with your child when they're offline is crazy. You're actually simply going to activate them more. All you will do is make them worse, not better. It's absolutely impossible. And the only thing you can do at that moment is get yourself back within the window of tolerance. Get yourself grounded, breathe, calm, relax. Be an image, a reflection to them that life is safe. Stay calm. Stay calm and stay relaxed. So when trauma reaction is triggered by the amygdala, this is what we've said, the prefrontal cortex shuts down. That causes a loss of control over values, pro-social values, empathy, service, inspiration, and control over impulses, self-interest, competitive, status, power, and control, impulse control. In other words, that gets shut down. You don't, imagine this, your kids going through life constantly being triggered because they have complex trauma, as we've explained. And when they're triggered, they lose control over values and impulses. That means they become impulsive, they react impulsively, And they react as if they don't have values. They do things that are crazy. Crazy. Like weird haircuts. Like dressing in nutty ways. Like isolating in their rooms for days on end. Etc., etc. You know, you have kids. You can do the list as well as I can. But all that stuff, now just get this. If we're making the case that the amygdala, a trauma reaction, that means the amygdala recognizes there is a threat to me right now and shuts down the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system just the way the Ribono Shel Olam made us to save us, to keep us safe, the bear in the woods, right, Marshall? But unfortunately, our traumatized kids have the same system working on them. And guess what they lose? They lose control over values and control over their impulses. How many of us here, honestly, have complained to each other, been confused and upset about our children's behavior, particularly in reference to what appears to be their lack of values and their lack of self-control? Should we have a show of hands? Or do we need to? We all do it. Thank you. Someone actually did it. I appreciate that. We all did that. Do you understand? And if you understand that we did that, in light of what I'm explaining, where the system, the brain, made them do that. That's what the amygdala does, because they're not treated complex trauma victims. Hashem Yirachem. That we react that way to them, not only is it not constructive and helpful, it's profoundly destructive. It drives the kids into needing to dissociate completely, which is what binge movies and drugs does for them. Binging on movies round the clock, or TV shows, or doing drugs, disconnects them. Because when you're in a place where you're now judged, criticized for lacking values, where the disappointed parents, your face, the people who are meant to love you, show in their face and body language that you're a disappointment to me because you don't have a good set of values. Where are your values? How can you do this? Or you're so out of control. I mean, imagine those words. You're so out of control. Yeah, my amygdala put me there. I mean, if they knew. But that's not what happens, unfortunately. What happens is that they become completely broken. The world caves in on them. That's why this is so crucial. Do you understand? Because if we understand that, it's not choice. They're not making choices in their bad values. They're not making choices in their bad impulses. The brain is helping them survive. And for that we should criticize them. Take a look at this picture. This is really mummish, mind-boggling. This is a PET scan of a child's healthy brain and an abused brain. You can see the front is the top, the back. The red area is the area of electricity, of functioning. Red shows high level of functioning. So we know what's at the front of the brain, right? What's at the front of the brain? The prefrontal cortex, right? When that's online, we're rational, we have empathy, we have insight. You know, all the 9 things are online. The healthy brain, they're online. Take a look at the brain of an abused child. By comparison, they're offline. And guess what's at the back of the brain? The survival stem. Take a look. What's more here is the survival stem is more because they've shifted their energy to the back. That's an abused brain. And Hashem Yirachem, that we blame a kid who's in an activated state like that, where the front of their brain is offline, and we should come and criticize their behavior. We should be upset with them. We should even try and reason with them at that point. What a joke. It's pasha cruel. It's irresponsible and it's cruel. once we understand the sugya. That's why we have to understand this sugya. Debating, discussing, arguing, pleading, begging, it's all useless if the prefrontal cortex is offline. There's no one home. They're in survival state. And the only thing productive we can do at that place is deactivate ourselves. Become a person who they can feel safe with. They can be in company of you and you're stable. You're not droshing them, you're not preaching, you're not begging and pleading, you're not bribing and rewarding. You're nothing, you're accepting. You're accepting, I love you, Ba'asher Hu Sham. Guess what that does to a kid who's activated? It brings them back into a window of tolerance. I'm not saying it's magic and it's that second, but I can tell you, when your child becomes aware, unconsciously, we don't discuss this with them, but when they unconsciously become aware that that's what's going on here, guess where they feel safe? With you, at home. And they can actually start to heal. And they don't have to run away. Our job is to recognize that when they're in that state, take a look at it. The red is gone in the abused brain. There's no activation. There's nothing there. The prefrontal cortex is offline. So debating, discussing, arguing, talking, begging, pleading, it's all useless. Not just useless, it's cruel. It's straight up cruel. Chances are it will activate them more. And if you've ever tried it, you'll know I'm right. It's really simple. Try debating, discussing, logically, anything with a child when they're in an activated state like that. See what happens. It won't go well. If you've ever tried it, you know. Take a look at this. These are CT scans of a healthy brain and one with PTSD. The picture in the left, this time the front of the brain is at the bottom. Look at the healthy brain, the red spots on the front. That's the prefrontal cortex. A healthy brain, that's the place you want to be. Functioning life, empathy, insight, attuned communication, right? Look at the PTSD brain. That's not an activated brain. That's the brain of a person with PTSD prior to activation. That's their sitting, their regular state. That's what complex trauma looks like. Rabbi, take a good look at that picture. Because if you have a child with complex trauma, that's what their brain looks like. Now think about what demands and expectations you have of them. Think about how you interact with them. They're completely not there. And until we treat the complex trauma, lecturing, preaching, begging, bribing, all this stuff is worthless. It actually sets them up for future failure. Most of them won't handle it at all. Not at all. Because they're simply not there. That's the brain of a PTSD person. It's just off. No, it's treatable. Everything's treatable. Everything's treatable. The question is, what's the role of us as a parent? What's our role here? Okay, so here's the crucial considerations. First of all, PTSD. You have to think of the concept that the brain of your child, think of your child. You have to get your child in your heart and your head and think of your child with complex trauma. That means they have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. That means they're triggered all the time. They're constantly offline. You have to think of it that the brain was hijacked by the amygdala. The amygdala sees threats everywhere. So what's our job? Reduce the threats. At least in context with us. You know how you reduce the threats? One of the ways, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us all an amazing gift. It's called a smile. It's called a smile. Everyone has one lurking somewhere inside. We've all got them. I prove it to my grandchildren because I point out somewhere in your tummy there's a smile and it shoots right up on their face. So I know I'm right. Everybody has a nice smile. Kadosh Baruch Hu gave us a nice smile. There's many reasons for it. Chazal talk about it. But for these kids, there is nothing better ever than a smile. Whatever they do, it doesn't matter. On the contrary, do you remember I explained before, if the kid goes and gets a mohawk, right? And then you smile at him and love him, he knows you love him. If he gets a nice crew cut with payers coming down the side, he doesn't know if you love him. You just love his payers. You're like dancing for joy. My kid's got payers again. You're texting all your friends. He's got payers. Oh my gosh, he put payers back on. Wow. Right? He knows that. But if he puts on a mohawk and you got this big smile and you think, oh my gosh, that's adorable, wow. And you love him and you put that smile on your face, then he knows he's loved. That's how we hijack their brains back from the amygdala. There's nothing more powerful than your smile. I always tell the men, we have those little tefillin mirrors, if you check your tefillin, your rush, if you're yakish, you've got two, make sure. Just kidding. That mirror, keep one in your pocket. When you come home from work, take a quick look. If you don't see that smile that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you, go for a walk. Go daven ma'ariv. Do anything but walk in the house to your kid. Don't walk in the house without that smile. Ladies have in your compact, right? Things, right? I know stuff, see? We want to hijack his brain back. Do you understand? It was taken by the amygdala because he or she sensed fear, danger, and they had the severe psychological reaction, exposure to, right? We got the whole Lashon going there, right? Well, one of the best grounding tools to bring your child back within the window of tolerance is a warm, gentle smile. Nothing dramatic, nothing fancy. You don't have to say brilliant things. You just have to be relaxed, grounded, and smile. Smile at your kid. Let your kid know he's loved regardless. Doesn't matter what he's doing. I love you. When you get really good at this, you can even say, yes, you may be very challenging. It's true, but I love you. You can get there, and he knows it, and he appreciates it. He comes and gives you a hug, because he knows it's true. I'm finishing. Parts of the brain we said are hyperactive, and parts are hypoactive. That means your kid will be going outside the window of tolerance all the time. They'll be flying too high and too low. That's what PTSD does. Our job is to get them back in the middle. You have to get yourself back in the middle. You have to breathe. I'm telling you, you can learn techniques if you want. Go to your local therapist. They'll teach you. But there are so many books. Mindfulness. Mindfulness is like, sweeping the world today for the last few years. There's so many books on mindfulness. Say, by whom? By God. God gave us mindfulness. No, he gave it to us direct, I promise you. The author, God, G-O-D. You'll find him on Amazon. Mindfulness. I'm just teasing, I'm sorry. There's a million books on the subject, but there's, get a book, Mindfulness for Beginners. It doesn't matter, God gave us that one too. It's fine. Mindfulness, there probably is one already. I bet you there is. Mindfulness for Dummies. The Idiot's Guide to Mindfulness. I'm sure it's out there. Mindfulness, you know what's special about mindfulness? It's so easy. You take it with you wherever you go. You don't have to be a super expert, like the Eastern cultures that turn it into a Avodah Zarah. It's so ridiculous what they do with it. We don't have to go there. Mindfulness, it helps you center. Be present. Be present with yourself. Be a centered person. grounded. Our kids need this from us. Because do you see how that's the antidote to everything I've been talking about? The antidote is us. That we can center ourselves. We can breathe through. They're all looking for God's guide to mindfulness. Everyone's like, I'm telling you, everyone here, they were like, okay. So when their parts of the brain are hyper or hypo, that means outside, we got to bring them back in the middle. So the smile on your face and being grounded as a person. Ground yourself. Don't overreact. Don't catastrophize. It's not a disaster. We'll deal with it. We'll get through it. Life goes on. Here's the most important one. 1 second. Oh, I got 3 more. They're all good. This is it, and I'll finish with this. Okay, this is it for tonight. These 3 things. First of all, listen to this. It's viewed as adaptive. You have to realize, when the amygdala saves a child and makes them hypo or hyper, makes you reactive, it's really saving them. The experience of being confronted with their complex trauma is so painful. It's so painful they would want to die. So disconnecting, do you understand? Running away from it all and disconnecting is adaptive. Let's contrast that with maladaptive. A maladaptive behavior is when you keep doing it when you don't need it. Adaptive, we consider their behaviors to be adaptive. In other words, they're trying to survive. When they dress, like I said, when the girl dresses in a totally unsneeristic way, that's adaptive. She's trying to find out, does mommy love me? Or does mommy just love the way I dress? So she's adaptive. Do you understand? She's traumatized and adapting to find out. If she stays that way for the rest of her life, it's maladaptive. That's not healthy. But in the process of trying to survive, drinking, kids who drink is adaptive. They're trying to drown their sorrows. You do it for the rest of your life, it's maladaptive. But when they're doing it, it's adaptive. They're trying to survive. When triggered, when a kid is offline, when the amygdala triggers and they're offline, is it reasonable to reason with them? No. It is unreasonable because they are not reasonable. Because reason is in the prefrontal cortex. So if that's offline and you're trying to reason with your kid about going to school or dressing properly, putting on his tzitzis, or dressing sanur to go to school, and she's offline, is that reasonable? They're offline. No. No, it's ridiculous. It's crazy, actually. And not only that, but you'll probably trigger them and put them into a worse tailspin. It is not reasonable to reason with someone who is unreasonable by virtue of the fact that their brain is offline. So stop reasoning with them. It saves a lot of wasted conversations. My wife and I remember a story we had once when our eldest daughter was struggling. She was in Baltimore at the time, and she wanted to speak to me about something. She was in a park. I knew exactly which park it was in Baltimore, and there was a cell phone. It was days before cell phones, a public call box. And she called, and she said something to me, and I started, before I knew all this, I hadn't met Shimon Russell yet. So I didn't know. So I knew nothing about this. And I started to launch into a whole drasha. It was probably one of the best drushas I've ever given. I mean, it ranked right up there. And then I found out I gave this drasha to the receiver was hanging in the wind underneath the phone box. She'd gone right away. The moment I started, she left it. And I spent 20 minutes or so giving a drasha to the air in some park in Baltimore. Reasoning with someone who is unreasonable because they're activated. Who's the meshugana? You or them? And the last one is don't give up. This is for tonight. the concept of neuroplasticity, that Baruch Hashem, a brain can be retrained. Not overnight, and it's not easy. But let's not give up. I've tried to make the case as stark can be, so that we understand what our role is. So we understand what our poor kids are going through. But don't give up. Because when we start doing this, and they mature enough and get old enough, and they're ready to start retraining, they can retrain their brain. Brain is well known, there's a concept of neuroplasticity, whereby the brain can actually be trained and grow constantly and repair itself. So we can get them back online. I really, really hope this has been helpful. You've been great, and we'll continue tomorrow.